Hi, it's Paul Laverne, registered psychotherapist with Turning Point Counseling. I'm here today with Chantal, who's actually the partner of Cam. In one of my previous videos, Cam talks about his journey into recovery from sexual addiction. And I'm really pleased to have Chantal being willing to come on and share her story as Cam's partner, what her experiences were like being the partner of a sex addict who was acting out, and then getting discovered, that whole D-Day, discovery day. And then, as he went through his recovery, there was also, Chantal had her process in working through all of those things as well. So hi, Chantal.
Hi,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks again. I really admire your courage and being willing to speak out and share to help other. Yeah, my hope is that this helps other partners of
Yeah.
addicts who are going through what you've been through, and
Mhm.
even for people, if you're someone that thinks you may be a sex addict or struggling with compulsive sexual behaviors. I hope that as you watch this, it helps give you some insight into and empathy into the partner's perspective. So, Chantal, let's start with just talk about what it was like being married to someone who was hiding their compulsive sexual behaviors. At what point did you sort of suspect something? What did you do when you suspected something? And what was the reaction to that? So let's start with that.
Yeah. So at the time that I first discovered something was going on, my partner and I were not married at the time. We were dating and we had moved out to Alberta together alone. We had no family or friends or supports out there. We moved out there for work. We had been dating 2 years at that point. And everything was going really, really well. At least I thought. Up to that point, like our relationship, I had no suspicion there was anything going on. I don't know if that was just me being naive or me just kind of going in the relationship really just trusting him. Um, but it started happening around the time that he had gotten a new job and he was using a work cell phone, and he had left that job and needed to get his own personal cell phone because the only cell phone he had was the work one. And so we had gone to go get him a new cell phone, and he had to log into his email in front of the lady. And that's when I had seen on the phone that a message had popped up from a website,
Okay.
that it was a woman saying, "Hey, babe," or something like that.
Okay.
So I was like, what is that about?
So you're at the kiosk of the cell phone
Mhm.
place, and
Yeah.
he's getting ready to get a new phone or something, and then
Yeah.
you see that. You
Yeah.
just see it on a screen. Okay.
Yeah. Out in public at the kiosk. Yeah. And so at that point, I did have, like, I knew what his password was because he had given me a password to his computer a long time ago. So I just guessed at his password to his email because now I'm like escalated and furious, not knowing what this is. So I went through his email and found a whole bunch of different messages from websites, dating websites, hookup websites, things like that. So that was the first sort of discovery altogether.
And
Um,
what was that like? Like, what were you feeling when you saw that?
Oh, I literally, my blood was boiling. I could just feel myself shaking. I didn't know like what to say or what to think. I just remember looking over at him, and he kind of just gave me this wide-eyed look and was silent. Like he didn't say anything. I think he kind of knew that I had seen that and he was kind of freaking out.
So is this
Um,
later at home, or are you still at the cell phone kiosk?
Still at the cell phone kiosk at this
Oh,
point. Yeah.
okay. Wow. Okay, so you
Yeah.
grab his phone and you're looking, and you see, there the doors open wide, and you sort of get a good look into what's actually going on, right? Okay.
Yeah, like at that point, I had used my own cell phone to log into his email. Like he was doing the whole exchange thing with the lady, and I had my own cell phone logging onto email, and I was doing my own
Oh,
research on my end.
yeah.
And then it just kind of from there, I was like, I need to get out of here, and so we wrapped it up really quick. And I just remember being like, at that point, we were engaged.
Okay.
And at that, I remember just taking off my ring and throwing it in the cup holder and said, I was really, really upset, obviously.
Yeah.
Um,
Did you have kids at this time?
no,
Okay, so no kids, but you're engaged,
yeah,
and you have, it never enters your, it's never even entered your mind probably that
no,
that he would be doing any of this. Is that right?
right.
Yeah. So you're completely like blindsided.
Yes,
It's like a
100%.
truck, like a train hit you,
Yes,
right?
yes. Yeah, it was horrible.
And you're physically like the knots in the stomach. You said you were like vibrating and
Yeah,
okay, okay,
yeah, yeah, kind of just like felt like I couldn't even breathe, you know what I mean? Like just
yeah.
because it was just such a shock to me. I'm like, what is this? Right. And
Uh,
like I said, I thought everything was going great and we were engaged and like I never like had any suspicion. Like he was close with my family, I was close with his, like everything just seemed really solid, you know? And so that was just really like a slap in the face. Well, more than that. Um, so, it kind of went from there. He used the usual sort of excuses that um, his first thing that he had said to me was that he just thought our sex life was boring. That was the first thing that he had just blurted out to me. And
wow. Okay.
and right. And I'm like, okay, so, instead of talking to me about that, you just decided to now go on a website, right? Like I was just really confused because like I didn't feel like our sex life was boring.
Well,
Um,
you're just blamed.
you're right.
Like he's the one that has been going outside the lines
Hmm.
blatantly, like it was unambiguous, right? It was obviously sexual, these
Yeah.
things. And the first thing that happens is you get blamed.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So
Yeah.
that's another gut punch.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So that was incredibly hard to hear,
Okay.
obviously, because then I'm like, okay, so I'm the reason for this, but I didn't understand why he couldn't just tell me like or talk to me about that, right? Like
Mhm.
so, as soon as you think that, so you think that our sex life is boring, that go on these websites and now you're looking for something else, like it just didn't make sense to me. Um but and then it kind of kind of led into him later on saying that that wasn't true and that I can't really remember the specific excuses he was using that time, but that he didn't know why he was doing these things and he was only like it was always the I'm only going on these websites because I like to get pictures. Like he was talking about how he kind of likes to the chase of like talking with the women and getting the pictures, but it was never physical, it was never in person. That he was found these websites through his coworkers, so these coworkers of his were telling him about these websites and that's what led him to go on them. And so it was always just that same excuse that it was just purely online, it was nothing physical. um Kind of at that point I think he was kind of like gaslighting me to believe that it wasn't cheating because it wasn't
Right.
physical.
Right.
So
Yeah. I call that minimizing too, right? Like
yeah,
when I'm working with addicts, like we start to look at those excuses and justifications and minimizations like early on because all addicts lie to themselves, right?
right,
And before they lie to you, they've already lied. He's already told and convinced himself it's not really cheating because I'm not touching this person or meeting them or having sex, and that's very, very common.
right, okay,
So but to you it's, yeah, no, it's not okay.
right,
It
right.
felt like cheating. I mean, just knowing him talking in a sexual way with other women, did that feel like cheating to you?
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, of course it did.
yeah.
Mhm.
And then I started kind of thinking about other red flags after that had happened, that I never had put two and two together before because I never had any trust issues. I had no reason to not trust him before.
Yeah.
Right. Like I think that's just what I was going on because I felt we were good. I felt we were solid. I never had any reason not to trust him. But
Well, when you accepted his marriage proposal, I mean, you did that in good faith, right?
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, like I have no reason not to trust you. You are a trustworthy, honorable person of integrity, and I
Yes.
will agree to spend my life with you.
Yes. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So after that happened, I was kind of noticing some other things like hadn't noticed before, that he was bringing his cell phone into the bathroom with him. Like even when he would shower, he'd bring his cell phone in the bathroom. When he'd go to the bathroom, he'd bring it in there. When he'd be like playing video games or at any point in time, he would always be keeping his cell phone face down. So then, you know, I guess so I couldn't see anything pop up. So there was like little things like that I started thinking about after when I had made this, like when this discovery had come about that I never realized before. I'm like, okay, that's, now that I think about it, that's sketchy, right? Like not being able to see, like he's really just hiding his phone a lot of the time, right?
Okay.
So those
But you're noticing this, like you weren't before, but now you are noticing this.
yeah.
Right.
So now I'm kind of like on alert to be like, okay, I can't remember. Okay, so after that discovery had happened, I had talked to him about that. I said, okay, like now I realize that that's just not okay, and you're obviously hiding things from me. At that point, like when I had decided to, okay, let's try and work through this, I said, there's no way that I'm ever going to be able to trust that you're not doing anything unless you kind of be really open with your phone and have, you know what I mean? Like, because it seemed like a lot of the behaviors was being done through his phone. So I had said to him that I would like transparency. I would like you to not be hiding your phone from me. If you know what I mean, if you're not doing anything, there's no reason for you to not to, right?
Yeah.
And I think he also allowed me at that point to like give me the password to his phone. He said, you can go through my phone anytime you want. Like very much kind of trying to build that trust again with me to be like, if we're going to work on this, like you have full transparency. You can look through my phone. You can see if I'm doing anything, things like that. So essentially, I think that's kind of what kept me in going with him, right? Was because he was always kind of giving me a little bit of these things that would help me, like kind of make me hang on to the trust in our relationship.
Right.
Which then again, it kind of just crashed and burned again from there. So I don't know if you want me to continue going with the storyline or anything, but
Let's kind of walk through the whole thing until he got into recovery, I guess.
yeah. So I mean, there were a lot of discoveries before he got into recovery, like a lot. It was over the span of 8 or 9 years.
8 or 9 years. Okay, so is that what you
Oh, wait.
described as kind of a cycle that happened every year or
Well,
two?
now that yeah, when I think about it, so the first discovery was when we were dating for 4 years. So, and we've been together 10. So I guess it'd been over the course of like 5 or 6 years that these discoveries were happening. But there'd be like big, long periods in between where I just didn't discover anything, right? So he could have very well still been acting out and I didn't know about it. So then anyway, we decided to, pack up and leave Alberta because I was furious. I needed my family and I didn't know what to do. I felt like, I don't know if we're going to be able to work through this. And then, kept promising me this is never going to happen again. It's never going to happen again. I love you, things like that. And then not even like a month later, I discovered he was talking inappropriately with a woman over. So there's this game, Words with Friends. It's an app. It's like a Scrabble game where you can play online with other people and there's a chat option. And he was talking inappropriately and sexually with this random stranger. At least I think she's a random stranger in this chat option of
A Scrabble game.
a Scrabble game chat.
Oh yeah, like who would ever? I mean, I used to play that with my grandmother. I mean, that's like the most non-threatening, innocuous,
Right.
thing that you could do on your phone, right?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
I don't know if maybe he did that because he thought he could hide it better because
Oh yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
So, that's okay. So that was another discovery.
And how did you find that?
Well, we were lying together in bed and he had kind of one of those cell phone cases that had one of those little like flaps to it. I had kind of glanced over and I saw that he was in chat, like a chat room, and then he quickly exited out of it. And I was like, can I see your phone? Because that, again, I'm on alert here because I'm like, there had been discovery before and there's these kind of, sketchy
becoming hyper vigilant at this point, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I just said, can I see your phone? And at that point, he said I could have full transparency. So he gave me his phone, but he was hesitant about it. Gave me his phone and I saw that he was talking inappropriately with this woman. There had been other texting conversations with random women on there, inappropriate, like pictures back and forth. So again, there was another discovery there. And that wasn't even like a month later after the first discovery.
So
So
now what did you do now?
honestly, I was like, what is going on here? Like, this seems so bizarre to me that you would literally would just promise me, last month and probably close to every day because I have trust issues with you that, you love me and you're going to work on this and you're never going to do it again. But then not even a month later, you're doing this again. Right. So I started bawling my eyes out. I was completely heartbroken. I was like, what is going on? Like, I don't know. Like, is it me? Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like, I was just so confused. I don't understand like why you keep doing this. Um, but then also to the point where I'm kind of like puzzled because I'm like, why would you be doing this through like a Scrabble game? Like, I don't understand. Like, where's your mind at? Right. And I kept saying, I'm like, if you don't want to be with me, then just don't be with me. Like, I don't understand like why this keeps happening. Right.
Right.
Um, and so I broke down, obviously. I was completely, so instead of like the first discovery, I was really angry the first discovery. Now this one, I'm like, now I'm just getting really sad, right? Because I'm just like, I don't even like, I felt defeated. I didn't know what to do. Um, so again, same excuses. It was only over text messaging. It was never in person. I don't know why I keep doing this. I don't know. Like, basically is what he would say to me every time is, I don't know. I don't know why I'm doing this. And that just it wasn't good enough for me to
It's not a
really,
satisfying answer at all, is it?
no, not at
Yeah.
all.
It's also kind of true, like for most guys I talk to, like they really, until they start recovery, they really don't have an answer, even for me,
Mhm.
right? But it's such an unsatisfying
Yeah.
response.
Yeah.
So how
Uh,
much did you internalize that and blame yourself for it? Like,
uh,
I'm not nice enough, I'm not, I'm not skinny enough, I'm not whatever, I'm not.
yeah, it made me feel like incredibly insecure, like incredibly like I now started comparing myself to these women because they'd be sending him pictures and I'd be like, well, what does he see in her? Like, what is so much
Mm,
better about her than it is about me?
mm,
Like I just, obviously like I just started kind of breaking down because I was like, I don't feel good enough for you. Obviously our sex life was kind of taking a turn for the worse at that point because like I just didn't feel emotionally connected to him anymore. I didn't trust him. I didn't feel pretty enough, right?
of course, yeah.
um, right. So yeah, like it just really left me like completely heartbroken and the trust was completely gone with him. And I kept saying to him, I said, if this had just been one discovery, then we could have built our trust back up. But because this keeps happening and I keep discovering, like this is just literally reopening the wounds every time. um so yeah, that was like the second discovery. I honestly can't remember all of them in sequence, but there'd been like probably like good like 8 months or so in between the discoveries, so it kind of happened throughout the years. um so yeah, like at that point, and like I said, it was very much the same kind of excuses I would get from him. It'd be like, I don't know why I'm doing this. And it kind of like progressed into him like up till maybe like the fourth or fifth time of him saying, I think I need to talk to someone about this. I think I need help. And he had agreed that he goes, I will talk to a counselor if we can find one. Um, and so this happened probably like a year or two ago where he had went through like an employee assistance program, like an EAP through his work, but this counselor was not specialized in sexual compulsive behaviors. It
Mm.
was very much a general counseling session. Um, and we weren't getting anywhere with that. Well, at least he wasn't.
Yeah,
Um,
he just went on his own.
yeah, because I
Yeah,
was at the point where I'm like, we need to do something here or we can't be together because I
yeah.
can't do this anymore. Right.
Well,
Um,
and for people watching, like you need to find a counselor that's trained in like a CSAT or an ASAT. I'm an ASAT. They need those letters because, and if you're a therapist watching this, if you don't know, you could be a great therapist, but if you're not familiar with these issues, you won't ask the right questions, and the addict will not tell you.
right.
So I think what happened is he was doing what, I call it the bare minimum. So I'll do the bare minimum to get my wife to get off my back or like shut her
Mhm.
up basically. and do a few sessions, and then I'll tell her, oh yeah, it was, it was good, or whatever, because you're saying go get counseling, so he does, so you're thinking, okay, it's better now, but really it's not, because he's not really getting. It's like, if I have a issue with my stomach, I don't see an ear, nose, and throat specialist.
Right.
I see as whatever they're called, a stomach doctor.
Right. Right.
But I don't see someone that does ear, nose, and throat, because, well, that's not their thing, right?
Right.
So,
Right.
okay. So you've moved back to Ontario as well, somewhere in there, you said, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So
Okay.
at this point, we had moved back to Ontario. I, kind of gave him an ultimatum before we got married, because I was really scared at this point. I'm like, if I marry him and he keeps doing these things, I don't even know like what I'm going to do. Right. Like, I was
Right.
so scared that I was just going to be like, to me, it felt like I would then be kind of trapped, because I'm like, he would promise me everything every time these discoveries would happen, that this will never happen again, and I don't know, and he'd be very remorseful, right? I think that was kind of what kept me in the relationship, was him, just he seemed very, very upset about it, very remorseful, and like he wanted to change, but obviously the change wasn't happening.
Do you
So
think
I
he
kind of,
was? Do you think he really was remorseful, or just remorseful he got caught?
maybe a little bit of both. I
Bit of
think
both.
maybe, like, now that I think about it now, I think maybe I think genuinely he wanted, like, I think genuinely he did love me and that he wanted to change, but I don't think he really knew how. But at the time, I thought it, like, a lot of the time I thought it was pretty fake. Like, I didn't think it was genuine behavior from him, right? Because I'm like, if you're really that remorseful, why would you just keep doing this, right?
Mhm.
Um, so I thought that remorse would push him to make positive changes, and it didn't. So every time this would happen, again, I'm kind of thinking in a different mind frame now, but back then I felt like you're just being completely not genuine right now. Like, this is not, you know what I mean? Like, this is not an apology. Like, you can't just keep saying sorry for this and then keep doing it. Like, that makes no sense. So, and I would really be analyzing his emotions, right? Like, a couple times he wouldn't even really be like crying, like, you just kind of be like, I don't know, I just felt like it was all very fake behavior. Like, and
Mhm.
again, that was kind of coming from a place where I was like, my trust is completely gone for you. I don't know. um I don't understand why these things keep happening. And so I just, again, that was kind of like me being like analyzing him to be like, you're not really sorry. Like, why would you keep saying sorry? Like,
Yeah.
if you're sorry, you'll stop doing these things, sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I gave it about a year, and then we got married, and nothing, there'd been no discoveries up to us getting married or anything like that. So things were going really well for a while. Like I said, there was a good, like, period of time in between where things were going well, and he was being transparent with his phone. And sometimes I would like look on there when he wasn't around and I wouldn't find anything. And that really kind of helped me rebuild the trust again, which it's not really a position I ever really wanted to be in the first place. I don't want to be looking through my partner's phone and email and stuff. Um, and so we had got married, things were good. We had our first daughter. And then there was another discovery when my daughter was about like 1.5. He was then on Facebook Messenger, talking to like an old friend, an old female friend, asking for pictures again, talking about how hot she looked with her purple hair and this and that, like, just very inappropriate conversation. So I confronted him, and I was very, very escalated again. I was very upset. And he kind of made the excuse that, oh, well, this is just how me and her talked. This is just me and her, just how we, like, this is what our friendship was like. And he hasn't talked to this girl in close to like 8 years. He kind of made the excuse, well, like, it wasn't inappropriate because this is just how we talk.
Sure.
And right. And I'm like, okay, but you have a wife, you have a child, like, we're a family unit now, and you think this is okay, like, to be asking for pictures from her and to be calling her sexy and whatever, right? um so again, I was just completely crushed and heartbroken. Like, I literally have like absolutely no words to describe how crushed I was. And I literally just feel like I'm just being like broken down after every single discovery of these. And not to mention, we now have a child together.
Right. Wow.
I think I was pregnant with our second at that point too. Um,
Right.
so like now this is now like escalating into, okay, well, like we now have kids, we have a family, like you're still doing these things, like you need to either make a decision, like are you doing this with me, are you not, like are you not happy? Like I was just at that point, like you need to figure out your shit because I don't know what the hell's going on with you, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, like I was very furious, crying, and then it kind of just took a downward spiral from that, because then after all of this, he wasn't any longer going to see this therapist anymore. Like he had just stopped seeing this counselor through his work, EAP, and literally see no action on his end to be working on these things, because obviously at this point, like there's something going on here, you need to figure it out, right? Or
Right.
I'm going, right? So wasn't seeing the counselor anymore. That I wasn't at that point able to really like talk about those things. Like I very much like just internalized it and just went into like a negative thought spiral on my own, where I'd be like super depressed for like 4 or 5 days and then just just blow up. Because I wouldn't talk about these things, and I wouldn't, at that point, me and him I didn't have that trust with him to be able to talk about these things, I feel like, because I didn't believe that he was ever going to like change, or, you know what I mean? Like to
Yeah. And
kind
did
of,
you have anyone to talk, like over the years, like the 5, 6 years this was happening? Did you have friends or family you could confide in, or are you carrying the weight of this all by yourself?
I confided, like when I first discovered, I confided in my sister, because my sister and I are really close. And she's just the go-to person that I talk to about when I'm going through things. She's just the first person that pops in my head. And I had no one else to talk to about this that I could trust. So I confided in my sister, and this was before we moved back to Alberta. And I said, I don't know if I could be with him anymore, things like that. She's sort of been my support throughout the years. And I've confided into like a really good friend of mine as well, so it wasn't like a big, like my parents had no idea, they still have no idea, my dad doesn't, like my other than Cameron, or other than, yeah, Cameron's parents, like no one really knows what's going on, because there's such like, I guess, stigma attached with this sort of thing.
Right.
I'm afraid that people are also going to judge me for having stayed with him, because the automatic thing you get, I find, with people is, as soon as you find out he's cheating, well, why are you still with him? Like once a cheater, always a cheater sort of thing. Like, why would you stay with him after all of this, right?
Yeah, I hear that a lot too. And my answer is be careful. Be careful how quickly you judge until you're in
Mm.
in those shoes,
Yeah.
they're not
Yeah.
in your shoes. And you had there, like you said, there was other positive aspects of the relationship, and there's a degree of remorse, at least enough to maybe convince you to give it a chance.
Yeah.
And everybody's different anyway, Chantal. And with some women I've seen where, they catch them once looking for an instant divorce.
Right.
And then other couples that he's been, porn, escorts, prostitutes, affairs for 20 years, and they are still together.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think it's every situation is unique. But I hear what you're saying, and when I started out, I understand about the addict shame, like having shame about doing those things, but it surprised me. It doesn't anymore, but it did about the partner shame. And I used to think, well, what are you ashamed for? Like, you didn't do anything, like, right? But it's
Mhm.
like when people are sexually abused, like the shame should be on the abuser.
Right.
It's the abused person as well that takes that on, right?
Yeah.
And partners would say, yeah, like I'm ashamed that
Mhm.
I'm in this situation at all.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
did I why didn't I get the hell out the first time, or
Yeah.
whatever, right? So
Yeah. And
mm,
honestly, like I don't even know how to even, like, I used to think that I was such like a weak person, like, like I literally would just put myself down all the time to be like, why didn't I leave? Like, why aren't I leaving? Like, why am I still here? And these are questions I would go through my mind every single day. I don't have them as much anymore, just because I've gotten my own support, but I would go through that through my head every single day to be like, why don't I leave? Why am I here? And I just would call myself weak and literally just, just be so negative about myself because of these actions that he chose to do.
Right.
Um, so this was very much now like making me very insecure and like not liking the person who I was. And I was very, after all this happened, like I was very, quick tempered, and I, you know, I just didn't like the person I was. Like when we would get into fights, I would call him every name in the book, and I would like freak out, and like I didn't like the person that I was turning into, like being with him.
Right.
And because I'm like, that's not me.
Suspicious, suspicious all the time,
Yeah,
mistrusting, angry. You probably had anxiety and depression from all this.
yeah,
Your
yeah,
body, like even like your body, like some women have like issues with their cycle, digestive issues, like all aches and pains, sleepless, all of that, right? Like it
yeah.
really hits you hard, doesn't it?
Yeah, like
Mm.
I remember the first discovery, I was throwing up because I was so upset about
You
it.
were literally throwing up.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm
I mean,
like,
I've never been that upset in my life about anything, and I've had some pretty crazy stuff happen to me.
yeah,
So that's wow,
yeah,
wow.
yeah. So that literally, that would run through my mind when he would keep acting out, is you literally saw me crying and throwing up, and you're still doing these, like you saw how upset I was, right?
That
And
still wasn't enough to stop you.
right,
Mm.
right. Like, what is it going to take for you to stop doing these things, right? And I honestly, like, the thing, like, again, another thing that kind of kept me with him was that, like, I just felt like he was two completely different people. Like, he was one person when he was with me, and then he had this secret life, right? Where I'm like, this is
Right.
not, I don't feel like this is you. This is not you. I don't understand, right? Like,
Yeah. That's
I,
exactly what it is. It's a double life. All addicts have double lives.
right.
Yeah.
And like, it wasn't like the typical, like, you can, I think women have intuition that you can tell if someone's not into the relationship, right? Like, you'd be
Mm.
able to tell really early on if they're maybe like not answering your text messages and they don't want to spend time with you. Like, I think you get a good idea of whether or not this intuition of this person, like if they're actually into the relationship or not. So at that
Sure.
point, you're like, okay, like, and then if they cheat on you or whatever, you're like, okay, well, this is not working out anyway. Goodbye. But he was just two completely different people. He would spend all of his time with me. Like, we would, have such good times together. We'd be laughing. We have a really great bond, and then these things would happen. I'm like, this is just not you. Like, these aren't matching, these two different personalities of yours. Like, it makes no sense to me, right?
But was there a part of you that thought like you're better than this? Like I see a part of you that is I know is better than this, and maybe that's what gave you hope.
Yeah, yeah. And
Mm.
again, because it's like, okay, I could see, like, that's where I kind of come in, where like I believed that he could make changes.
Right.
I just think that he didn't know really. Now I understand that he really just didn't know how to make those changes. Because now that we're very honest with each other, he would say he would go a period where he would like delete all the apps and delete all the messages, and he'd be done, and he would promise himself that he'd be done, and then he would kind of fall back into the behaviors again once these triggers started happening again. So again, like, I think, what kind of kept me around was the fact that I knew he was genuinely a good person, and he was a much different person when he was with me and my children, and or our children. And I just, those two different lives just didn't match, right? Like, that was just, I felt like that was not him, right?
Mm.
um so anyway, yeah, so I don't really know where I was going from here, but
No, well, you were just kind of, and then the last discovery, was basically, get help and or else, I don't
yeah,
think I can go on. And saw some counseling, but it didn't really help.
yeah,
And then okay, so I want to ask you how he found me, but I want to ask you first at this time, and you do have a background in mental health and addiction, right?
yeah.
So what was your frame? Like, have you ever heard the term porn addiction, sex addict, or compulsive sexual behavior? Was that even on the radar? Because you know, like you must be racking your brain, like what the hell is going on? And
Yeah.
it's kind of like, did it ever sort of click? Like it's kind of like an alcoholic, or he's kind of like a drug addict. Like you keep going back, you keep going back, you keep going back. Like so, what was that like going on in your head?
Do you know what's funny? Like we talk a lot about like process addictions and like shopping addictions and video game addictions and gambling.
Yeah,
But I had never thought for a second that like he was an addict, like a sex addict.
yeah,
That like for
yeah.
some reason that thought just never crossed my mind.
Right.
Um, so it would just kind of came as almost like a light bulb moment by the end. Like our marriage was on the line. I'd asked him to leave the house and to get out, and we were done, and we need to sell the house and all that.
Okay,
And
so it came to that point.
it came to that point. Yeah, this was a year ago. And because there was another discovery, same sort of thing. And so yeah, like that never crossed my mind for some reason. Like even though that I am in the field, we don't actually have people who come to us with those sort of concerns, right?
Yeah,
Because we just don't have like the funding to support that kind of treatment.
right.
So that had never crossed my mind, honestly. But then when I got thinking about it, like again, like his mom was a very good support for me. We started talking about how like the pattern of these behaviors were really like unusual, and for the like she would even say that he would be like curled up in a ball like crying about these things, and she was puzzled too, to be like, well, why are you acting this way? You keep making these choices, like what the consequences are going to be. And so we had kind of like talked about that a little bit. She goes, well, do you think it could be like a sexual addiction? And I was like, I never really considered that before. And I think maybe it was because I was so wrapped up in how much it negatively affected me. Like I think I was just so caught up in the emotion that I was just like, I don't care, like I just need to get out of this relationship, right? um that that kind of just gave me some time to think about it. I'm like, well, that could be a possibility. Like I never thought about that before.
Right.
So yeah, you
So
know.
what did you start Googling it or researching it, or how did you find me? Like what happened?
Yeah, I basically just went to Google because I had nowhere, like I didn't know where else to go. And just typed in like sex therapists like in my area. And I think it was like Psychology Today that popped up the website. And you were on there, and I kind of like, they give you those little bios or blurbs or whatever, right, of your experience. I kind of just really wanted to find someone who knew what they were talking about and they're specialized in the area, and that could actually help him, because up to this point we've had experiences with him going through these counselors that weren't doing anything, essentially, that weren't helping him, not that they weren't doing anything. And so that's, essentially I just went to Google to search for it and hoping for the best. And thankfully we had the support again from his family, his parents, to help us pay for the counseling and things like that, right? So luckily we were very lucky with the support that we got, and that we do have, to work towards his recovery.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So how soon after he started therapy with me did you like what were you thinking? Yeah, because I don't think I kind of met you till a bit later, right? So
Right,
what
right,
was going through your head? Like, are you like, okay, let's see here. Like I'm not expecting much, but
right.
let's see what happens, right? Like
uh
kind of like that, or
I think this honestly, what was going through my head was, this is the last straw. Like if this doesn't
okay.
work, if this doesn't help, then I need to have some boundaries here. Like I need to now be strong and just do what I need to do and just get out of this marriage, because so this was like this, you were our last hope. Like I was hanging on to that little tiny glimmer of, this could potentially be a really good thing for a marriage, right? But he could also very well just, keep doing what he's doing and keep acting out. And I very much still had and do have, some days that feeling that he is still acting out, because there's just been such a history and
Yeah.
of him acting out. And that's, I understand that now, that that's a very traumatic thing for me having gone through. that even when he was working with you, I still felt that he could potentially be acting out still, right?
Right.
So yeah, like the trust issues don't go away. The trust issues are still going to be there.
Like I tell guys, I say, look, it's trust is it's lost in buckets and gained in drops, right? You probably heard me say that. So you pour the bucket out, it's empty. And now you have a little eyedropper, say this, and you're drip, drip, drip. And that's how you fill it up. So every day you're sober and you don't lie, and you
Mhm.
don't lie. There's a
Mhm.
drop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that about 2 years into it. Okay.
Yeah.
2 years,
Yeah.
you guys are a year into it.
A year. Yeah.
Okay. And so I know you still don't trust them. And some people will be like, oh my God, it's been a year. It's like, no, give it another year
Yeah.
and you'll think about trusting him again one day,
Yeah.
probably.
Yeah.
Maybe 3 years, right?
Right.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So at what point in his recovery did you be like, okay, maybe this is catching here, or this is it? Like he's finally found help.
Yeah. I think it came down to, and it still is, like, this is kind of what's keeping me like building my trust very slowly back, is that he, was attending all appointments with you. He would talk about the appointments. He would share with me about any potential triggers. Like he was talking about it now. Like he was talking about the sex addiction and how it affects him. And he was really trying to understand, like, well, where did this come from? Like, did it have something to do with my past or my family? Like before, he would never even bring it up. Like he wouldn't even talk about it. Like it was a very like suppressed thing or like private thing, that now he was now kind of turning into this person who would now be talking about it with me. And um he had ordered some like books and like a workbook, and like so he's working in his workbook, and he joined what it's not
SLAA?
yeah, yeah, so he had
Yeah.
joined the group. And
What's that?
so yeah, so it was just like these were now turning, instead of him telling me like I'm gonna make changes, he was now showing me that he can make changes, and that he listens to a podcast every morning called Porn Free Radio, and like just things like that. Like he would talk about this podcast. So I think before it was very much like he would just really not talk about it, and
Right.
that's what I think kind of kept me in that deep depression, was and this anxiety, was that like he just wouldn't talk about it. I'm like, why are we going on and pretending that we're like okay and that we're just playing house together, but like we know there's an issue here, right? Like,
Right.
why aren't we talking about it? And that's what bothered me so much before. But now I feel like he is truly being like transparent about it and talking about it and really trying to understand and get to the root of it, to be like, why am I like this? Why do I do these things?
Yeah.
Which then kind of gave me answers to be like, okay, well, that makes sense now why every time I discover, he would say, I don't know.
Right.
Right, because I kind of put two and two together to be like, maybe he actually really didn't understand why he was doing these things. Like I think in the back of his mind he knew they were wrong, like it was wrong behavior, maybe
Right.
not in the middle of doing whatever you're doing, but like at the when you're done, right, like being like, this is not okay. But yeah, so it was essentially, it was him showing me these behaviors. Like right now, to be completely honest, like if he stopped going to the meetings, if he stopped doing his podcast, if he stopped seeing you, like I definitely would be going into some panic mode, right?
Right.
I need that consistency with him, and him showing me these behaviors that, yeah, I do want to make changes, and I want my family, and I want to work through this. And so essentially that's kind of what is very slowly building my trust back for him.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of partners ask me, how do I know he's changing? And I always say, what do I say? Believe behavior,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So all the things you mentioned, therapy, group, reading and books. Is he doing his homework? I give a lot of homework,
Yes.
podcasts and videos and resources.
Yeah.
You can see that, right?
Yeah.
And I tell guys, I say, look, if your partner can't see anything new and different in your behavior, what's she supposed to base her hope on?
Yeah.
Your word?
Yeah.
Well, your word doesn't count for anything,
Right.
right? So you have
Right.
to show her through your consistent behaviors.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and yeah, so when he was uh, making these same excuses over and over and basically lying to you. Like, what was going through your head? Like, were you like, I want to believe you, but I don't? Like, I should. Like, did you feel bad for not believing him because he seemed so sincere? Like, did you know what gaslighting was? Like, what was?
I no, I had no idea what gaslighting was at that time. I honestly, when those things would happen, I don't know. Like I loved him, but then I don't know if that's what kept me around. Like I honestly just I think I just again thought that he is a good person. Like that's all that kind of was in the back of my head was this is not him, right? He is a good
Hmm.
person. This is not him. And just like the patterns of his behaviors were just really it's just unusual. Like I'd never even like I said, I've never come in any kind of like had an experience or come in contact with anybody else who had been through this before, who had been displaying behaviors like this. And I'm like, it was kind of, I guess, kind of like snowballing or into us kind of figuring out, okay, well, this could be potentially an addiction. Like this could potentially be something different than just him like cheating on me and not wanting to be with me anymore. Like this was just, it was just very weird, right? Like just the course of the patterns and then him crying and being upset and begging me to stay in the relationship, right? Like I don't know who has the energy to keep doing that, right? Like if you don't like someone and you're just not vibing with them or whatever, you cheat on them, you kind of come to the realization, well, this is not working out. I no longer want to be with this person. I don't know someone who would just continuously be with someone for 10 years and just keep cheating on them. And I don't know, maybe that happens, but I just, to me, I felt like that's not right. Like I felt like this just wasn't him. Um, and then always that thought would come in my head, well, I need to leave. Like every time this would happen, I'd say, I need to get out of here. Like, why am I still in this relationship? Why have I let him do this to me so many times? And then again, those like reoccurring thoughts of me being insecure, me thinking I'm a weak person because I'm staying in the relationship. Like, why can't I leave? Do I not have like healthy boundaries? Like, it was kind of getting to the point where like when we had like our first daughter, I was starting to think, okay, well, I don't want my daughter to think that this is okay, like for someone to treat her this way. So it kind of turned into now me going a kind of mom mode to be like, now we have $2 to be like, okay, I don't want a man to treat my daughters like this. I don't want them to think that this is okay. If this were to ever come out in our family that they would discover that dad had some that was cheating on mom or whatever, I don't want them to go now carry this into future relationships. And this is me obviously like escalating the thoughts, but also
Hmm.
me wanting to be like a protector, right? Um,
Right.
so I don't know. Like honestly, I think it's just it was always me just being very confused and just wondering like, why can't I just leave this relationship? I need to leave. Like I don't know why I couldn't bring myself to that point. Right. So
And what made you finally say, like, okay, that's it. Like, get
um
out. We're done. We're selling the house. And
yeah,
yeah.
it's because after the second last discovery, when he started going into like counseling and saw a therapist who wasn't specialized in sex addiction, I said, what do we do? What is our plan if this happens again? What do we do here? Like, is this our last straw? And he said, if I do it again, we're not going to be together, is what he told me. Um, so we came up with that together to say, if you act out again, if you cheat on me again, we are not going to be together. And he had told me that from his own mouth, right? And
Okay.
then he was messaging prostitutes. So he had been talking with prostitutes like throughout all the discoveries and stuff like that. So they're like these acting out were came in different ways. So that time, the last time I had discovered that he was texting with prostitutes. And I don't know, with the intention to meet up with them, maybe. But he had said it was just to get pictures and this and that. But that's what kind of brought me to the realization was, okay, you had literally told me that if this happens again, we're not going to be together and there's no hope for our relationship. And he was also, yeah, he had also was messaging a coworker of his and talking about how beautiful she was and this and that. And so I literally was just like, reading these text messages and she was kind of like, well, like, you're married, I don't understand like where this is coming from. And he was like, I know, but like, I don't know. Anyway, it was just a really hard conversation for me to read about how my husband was like, so infatuated by this girl at his work and stuff and messaging her and stuff. And I think it just kind of got to the point where I'm like, dude, like, we can't do this anymore. Clearly you're not into this, right? Like, it just got to the point
Is
where
that when you realize like, okay, this is you, not me? Like this isn't
yeah,
about me, this is about you?
yeah, I was just like, I can't do this anymore. Like, I think I
Yeah,
just got to the point where I'm like, I don't have enough like energy or
yeah,
emotional energy. I don't have any more investment anymore to keep doing this with you, right? Like, if this is the life you want to live, then but we need to just not be together, and you need to go live your single life or whatever, right?
yeah.
So it was just like, I'm like, okay, you told me yourself that like, you know um if you had acted out again, that we wouldn't be together. So I'm like, this is you acting out again, so we knew what our plan was, and this is our plan. And so at that point, um I just messaged him, like texted him and shown him like screenshot of the conversation I'd seen, because I was snooping through his Apple Watch, and it's connected to his text messages on his phone.
Right.
I had this weird feeling to look through that Apple Watch, because I have trust issues, to see if there's anything going on, and there was. So I took pictures of that and sent it to him. I said, like, we're done. I said, I
Okay.
can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And then he had called me, and he seemed very scared, like seemed very shaken up, and was like trying to be like, oh, well, I need to explain. I just said, no, like, I don't need an excuse, because like all it's been over these years have been excuses, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think I was just at my breaking point. I just felt very defeated, and I felt like there wasn't anything I could do about it. And it just, like, I was just like, I just couldn't do it anymore with him. And I think that's what kind of like, I finally had that strength, I think, just to be like, no. And again, like, we had at that point our two, like, my second daughter was 3 months old. So we had our two daughters, and I was like, I can't, like, I
Oh yeah,
need,
three young kids, eh? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So I was just like, I don't want them to think that this is okay for, a man or their husband to treat them this way. So I need to do something about this.
So what happened to go from like we're done and you're living at your mom's house to okay, let's give it, like, was he in therapy for like a month or so, and then you were like, okay, maybe, it's working this time. Like what made you,
Um,
because it sounds like you were like right at the precipice, like basically the edge, 1 foot over the cliff kind of thing, and then
yeah.
somehow it came back from the brink. How did it come back from the brink?
Yeah, I think honestly, like, I don't think we would be where we are right now if it wasn't for the support of his family. Like, we're just a very close knit family. Like, I'm very close with his mom and close with his dad. Like, and throughout all of these discoveries, they have been aware of this going on. And so we all kind of like were there for each other and very supportive. And I think he was staying at his parents for like 2 weeks. And um I think he had started sessions with you at that point, and he was looking into groups. And again, I think what it was like him showing those behaviors of wanting to get better, right? Was okay,
Mm.
yes, like, thank you so much for looking into Paul, and I finally get to start counseling, and I want to make changes. And again, like, kind of like very much like mimic sort of the way that he would respond before, but this time it was like, like, he was actually like getting involved with these things, and actually like attending group and attending the sessions with you. And a lot of it honestly came down to, I needed help with the kids too. Like, it was hard for me to having gone through this very traumatic situation, and then now I'm at home, I'm a single mom with my two young kids. And
Yeah.
so it was kind of like, after a couple of weeks we had talked about it, I said, look, you can come home. But I think he was sleeping on the couch too as well. Like, we were in separate bedrooms. I said, I don't want to be like, as far as this is going right now, like, we are not together. Like, we're just going to be sort of this co-parenting unit, so you can help me with the kids, because I don't think it's fair that now I am doing all the work on my own with how, like, with the
Yeah,
kids.
why should your life get harder, right? Because of his
Yeah.
behavior.
Right. And like, not to mention, like, I was breaking down at that point, right? Like, I was completely distraught over this. And, and I'm like, now I have to be a single parent. And like, that's just super hard, right? Like, I just was like, you can come and help me with the kids. And like, he would, after work for those 2 weeks, he would come over for a couple hours, help them with bath time and stuff. And he'd be bawling his eyes out. And I think the realization was starting to set in that he was now losing his family.
Mm.
And I wasn't emotional about it at all. I was just like, look, like, like, I can't.
You're just detached at that point, indifferent,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I just need someone to help me with the kids and
Yeah.
totally figure it out, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So it was very much like an emotional detachment.
Mhm.
Like, I was like, we're not going to be intimate. We're not together. We're not sleeping in the same room. You can come here to help me with the kids. And that's the only reason why you're living here still. Right.
Well,
Um,
you're protecting yourself
yeah.
by doing that.
Yeah.
What was the emotional impact on you um,
Ugh.
of all of this over the years? And I just want to ask you for the record, because every partner says, when I say what was worse, the behaviors or the lying,
Mm, yeah.
what's your answer?
The line.
Right.
The
Yeah, you know
line.
what? I've been doing this 11 years and I don't think I've ever heard a woman not say, a partner not say that,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what's the emotional impact been? I mean, you've shared quite a bit about that so far, but anything else that comes to mind, or
Yeah, like, honestly, I think, like, still, like, even when we're talking about, like, with the trust thing, like, when we're just talking about regular things, like, he went to the grocery store and he's telling me about a story of an interaction with a customer at the grocery store. I'm just like, that's not real. You know what I mean? Like, I just always think that there's, like, even when we're talking about basic everyday stuff, I'm like, that's not true. Like, why is he lying to me? Like, now I
right?
suspect everything is a lie with him. And I'm always just, again, I'm on alert now to be like, okay, well, he's lying. That's not true. So it's very hard to kind of build that trust back when it's even about like the silliest things. Um,
Right.
so I have no trust. I am very, like, I would still consider myself very emotionally guarded. Like, I don't find that I'm as affectionate anymore. I don't, I can say this, like, I won't tell him I love him as much as I used to. Like, there's very much this, I still have a guard up because of all of this. Um, I've had, just kind of going off the trauma piece of it, like, I've woken up from like nightmares. Like, I've had nightmares of him cheating on me, and then I'd wake up and I'd be crying. Like, I just think it's just all this accumulation of all these like different discoveries over the years have really just, I don't know, just messed with me.
Traumatized you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of partners show signs of PTSD.
Yeah.
Like what you described, the hypervigilance means, your nervous system is like jacked up to the point where you see threats where there aren't any. Your default mode is to not believe rather than to just believe.
Mhm.
Flashbacks, right?
Mhm.
Unintrusive thoughts,
Mhm.
obsessive thoughts,
Mhm.
nightmares,
Yeah.
sleeplessness. Like this is all textbook PTSD, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But you've
Yeah.
never been in a war zone, you've never been attacked, you've never been shot at, you've never been in a natural disaster. You've just been
Mhm.
married to a sex addict.
Yeah. Yeah. And like,
And it is traumatizing.
yeah, and like everything, right? Like, to the point where I'll be watching a TV show and the husband cheats on the wife, and I'm now
Right.
finding myself getting triggered, and
Mm.
I have to now, like, intentionally now keep myself from watching those things because they're so triggering for me. Like, even on social media, like, I come across these videos of these women talking about how their husbands are cheating on them or red flags that they're noticing, and then I read the comments, and the comments are all like, get out of that relationship, get out of that marriage, what are you doing? And again, that kind of snowballs me thinking like, okay, well, why am I still in this marriage then? Like, am I a weak person? Like, and so I'm starting to question like my own like choices. And so it kind of came down to me needing to make that intent, like making intentions, or that having sort of that awareness that those things are very triggering for me. But sometimes I can't control it. Like, sometimes it'll just be on a show I'm watching and it's
Yeah.
like,
I mean, you
right.
can control the social media to a degree, but sometimes
Yeah.
you're watching a perfectly normally fun show or good show or good drama, and then all of a sudden, boom, there's someone's lied, cheated, or watches
Yeah.
porn or whatever. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And, it's hard because I feel like, there aren't many people, like, I can't really talk about this with people. Like, I now choose not to.
yeah,
I choose now not to share it with people because I'm afraid of the judgment of myself and my partner, right? Like, I'm afraid of them saying, well, why did you stay? Like, why are you in this marriage? And then they're going to now judge him to be like, well, you're such an asshole. And like, why
yeah,
would you do that to her? And in some way I'm like, I don't know, like, this has very much affected the person I am today, but people don't really know why, right? Like, people don't know, like, what has she been through that's made her the way she is today, right? Like, I just, and I would, I don't know, it's hard because I'm like, I'm not the same person anymore. Like, I literally, this has been such a hard situation to go through and to stay in. And now I try and tell myself that, I'm stronger for having gone through all this and to stay in the marriage. But before, I was very much just beating myself up to be like, you're an idiot. What are you doing? Like, you're so weak. Like, why can't you just leave? But I stuck through it. And, this is where we're at now. And I'm super thankful. Like, as much as I still don't trust him, like, I'm super thankful for the behavior, like the changes that he's made, and the way that he's trying to show me that he wants to change. And I need that. Like, I will be needing that for a very, very long time. I think probably for the rest of our marriage. You know what I mean?
absolutely.
Um, as soon as you stop those things, I do not think that you are, I feel like you've probably relapsed, right? It's going to get to that point if he does stop, right?
What's
Um,
what's helped you in your recovery? And, in the last about almost a year now, I think,
mm,
since this all started. What, is it
yeah.
therapy, group, reading, support? Like you mentioned, his family's been very, very supportive.
Yeah.
What else have you done that's helped?
Um, Well, I wouldn't necessarily consider myself like a religious person, but I would consider myself a spiritual person. And I've always kind of had the belief that things, kind of happen for a reason. And that's just my opinion about that. I joined like an S&on group. Like, I enjoyed groups that now I can connect with women who've been through the same thing. That was very helpful because, like I said, I don't share these things with my family or friends or anything. So they were pretty much my only lifeline, in the fact that, like, I actually have a group of other women and some men who have been, through similar situations, and they would be just crying and just kind of like spilling their heart out about how difficult this is and how they don't trust their partner. And I could relate to what they're saying, and I'm like, I went through the same thing. Like, we all just really connect with each other that way, that
Okay,
people who haven't been through this would never understand how
right.
incredibly painful it is. Like, they'd have absolutely no idea.
So
um
you've attended your own 12-step group, S&R, right?
yeah,
For
that's enough.
partners. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's been helpful.
Yeah, that's been super helpful. And obviously it's a 12-step group, and you kind of start thinking about those steps, and a lot of them is kind of just knowing that, like, I kind of just tell myself that one day, if I know this isn't right for me, like any decision in life, if you wake up tomorrow morning and you know that something's not right for you, something's just going to tell you that, and you're
Right.
just going to know that, right? So I very much believe that, there is, if this is like a lesson for me, or is this is just a way for me to kind of grow in like all my relationships. I'm kind of looking at it from a broad standpoint now, that maybe there are things that I need to work on myself, that, like, I just know that, like, one day if I feel like this isn't it, and then something's just going to give me that gut feeling that this is just not, this is not worth working towards anymore. So I very much kind of, like, I don't really take on the blame anymore. I know I wasn't the reason for this to happen. And I can't control it. So there's really not much I can do other than just kind of focusing on my own recovery and kind of work in my own positive direction with that. I very much separate myself from his addiction. Like, he needs to work on that on his own. He needs to focus on his own recovery. And I need to focus on myself, because there's nothing I can do about his addiction.
Mhm.
Um,
You can't control it, you can't cure it.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously that took me a really long time to understand, obviously, because all you do is just self-blame and think that you're the reason for this, and you get insecure and you feel like shit. And, but essentially it has absolutely nothing to do with me. It's not
No, you
my
didn't cause
fault.
it either, right?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
you didn't cause it, you can't cure it, you can't control it. I always call those the 3 Cs, I always tell those to partners,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
because it's the trauma gets you into that place of hypervigilance, which gets you trying to control it and manage it and cure him and make him do things. And
Mhm.
usually partners have to kind of let that play out for a while before they realize how utterly futile it is.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what you said, you know what, I have no control over him or what he does. I have to believe behavior and I have to see that he's doing his recovery, and then that's it. And then focus on myself and what I need to get better, right?
Yeah.
How important was the him doing a full disclosure? So that for people that don't know what I mean, it's when the recovering person writes out in chronological order all of their activities, um, and then reads them to their partner so that the partner has all the information. Because usually what happens is, what I call the trickle disclosure, like it's a little bit of information dribbling out and dribbling out and dribbling out. And it kind of basically brings you to the place where, I don't, if, okay, if you're hiding that, what else are you hiding? And I don't believe anything you say. And even when you're telling me the truth, I don't believe you. And even when you tell me you've told me everything, I still don't believe you've told me everything,
Yeah.
right? And then we have the full disclosure, and I don't think Cam did the polygraph, but that was on the table to do the
Yeah.
polygraph if you needed it.
Yeah.
How important was that? I mean, I know it's terribly difficult for everybody, but
Mhm.
what
Yeah.
was that? Was that helpful to
Yeah. Well, in
you
the sense,
or?
yeah, into the sense that like we needed just to, I needed him to just get it out all on the table. I needed him to be completely honest with everything, because up to this point, all he'd been doing is lying to me. And so
Mm,
I needed him to just get it all out. You know what I mean? Like it's no secret at this point. Like I know that you've been acting out. Like let's just kind of just all put it on the table. Like if you want to move towards us working on our marriage and us being together, then you need to just tell me everything that occurred.
mm,
Um, but so prior to the discovery, or sorry, the full disclosure, he had a session with you and he was really emotional after it. And so we were kind of talking, and um he didn't want, like, he wanted to wait until the full disclosure to tell me to the full extent of his acting out. At this point I had no idea that any of these acting out behaviors were physical or in person. But he had admitted to me that he had slept with prostitutes. So that was incredibly hard for me to hear. I did not freak out when he told me. I said, okay, because I had suspected, like there was no,
got it.
right. Like, I'm like, hey, that's not a surprise to me. Like with everything else that you had, like you've been talking to prostitutes. So like, obviously at some point you probably would have met up with one. Right. Um, but I think it was just like, I was so incredibly hurt that it took him this long. Like he had been working with you for quite some time before that even came like out, and like, so I was just like, okay, that took a really long time to admit. So I didn't want to like freak out on him, because I'm like, look, like that was probably really difficult for you to even admit to me. And I think I just been so like, I don't know, I just so emotionally damaged at that point that I didn't really react. Right, it's kind of like the detachment almost again, right, where I'm like, okay,
Kind of
at this,
numb at this point, just numb
yeah,
to it.
you're right. So at
Yeah.
this point I'm like, I don't really emotionally react anymore. It's kind of like, okay, it is what it is. But it wasn't until like later that evening where I just kind of let it sit in, and when I'd be alone I'd be kind of thinking about it, and then I went through a really hard couple days. It was very painful for me to hear that.
So is
And
this during the disclosure you heard it, or you heard this before the disclosure?
this was before the disclosure,
Oh,
when
okay.
he wanted to wait for the disclosure, but I must have just convinced him to tell me just the way that I do. And so it came out. And so when we did the full disclosure with you, none of what he had talked about was new to me.
Wasn't new, right?
It
Okay.
wasn't new. So I was like, okay. So that almost in a way was probably better for me. Like if I had just heard about for the first time about him acting out physically with other women and with the prostitutes, and that probably would have created a much different reaction in me, I think, than it gave me time to process it.
Okay.
But yeah, I think the full disclosure was very important in the sense that we had both agreed that this is his time to just get it all on the table. Like, I'm not going to freak out on you. Like at this point, I'm completely like just not even attached to this anymore. Like I'm so completely numb to this that just get it on the table. I want to look at this as like a fresh start, and let's put this behind us and move forward, because essentially that's what he wanted to do, and that's what I wanted to do, and kind of give this a last kind of shot. So it was almost like closure to us in a way, to kind of like, let's close that chapter and just kind of move on, right?
So Chantal, what would you say to someone, a partner watching this, that is like you a year ago or 2 years ago, that or 5 years ago, that's just had a discovery or
Mhm.
suspects something that's going on? Like, what a tough spot to be in,
Yeah.
because you don't want to ignore your intuition or the evidence. Sometimes there's intuition, but sometimes there's evidence.
Yeah.
And maybe you don't want to have that conversation, or you don't want to know more, or you're obsessed with knowing more. You want to confront, you're scared too. what,
Yeah.
what would you say to that partner watching right now?
Yeah, I think honestly, just ask the questions to your partner, and just be very direct about it, and tell them that like something's going on, that you suspect something's going on, and just um don't like just kind of like hide away and not say anything. And it's almost kind of have to find some strength in that, to be very out and direct about it, to be like, I know something's happening. And obviously, it is a very painful thing to go through and to hear like about the acting out and these things happening. But I find that, the sooner you can get help, the sooner, you guys can, find your recovery and be in a better spot. And I think honestly, I don't think sometimes that like the more that you kind of just ignore it, like it's not going to go away. It's still just going to brew. It's still going to happen. So I think you're going to just like let your partner know that that it's going on, and ask him those questions. Are you watching pornography? Are you talking to other women? Things like that. And just let him know that you are very much aware that, that things are happening, things are going on. And kind of just find your confidence as much as you can in that. I kind of heard from a lot of women that they tend to just kind of ignore it and kind of just try and pretend it's not happening, but that's essentially not going to fix anything. It's not going to bring the problem to the surface to be able to be worked on. I think your partner needs to know that you aren't dumb, like you are not stupid, like something's going on, you suspect it. So just be very upfront about that. Yeah, it's a difficult conversation, but it's honestly going to be your relationship's on the line, right? So if that's the only way that you're going to kind of like hopefully encourage him to talk about it. Honestly, I find too, even just from my own experience, it's really hard not to get emotional about it. It's very, very, very difficult not to get emotional about it. But I found that we were able to constructively talk about it better when I was not angry and having an outburst and throwing things. And like, it very much has to kind of, as hard as it is, that very much allows the partner to come clean about some things, knowing that his partner's not going to freak out on him or
Yeah.
so I've kind of learned that over the years, that every time there was a discovery or suspecting things, I would flip out and I'd be very angry and I'd be yelling and screaming, and that doesn't get you anywhere. And I think with any kind of any kind of argument with someone's partner. That's not going to get you anywhere. So I think it has to be this very much calm, collective state to say, I know I know something's going on. This is the red flag. Are you watching pornography? Are you cheating on me? Like, just being very direct about it. And I'm hoping that that will allow for a little more honesty and conversation with some people's relationships. It did for me, at least.
Right, right. Something I thought when you were talking is I find some partners, it's hard for them to like almost like kind of find their voice, like especially about porn, like cheating and like sexting and is a little more cut and dry, but a lot of women now are very especially younger ones like 30 and under, they're very socialized by our society to accept porn as completely normal. It's
Mhm.
something all guys do. And
Mhm.
like you don't even, it's like you don't even have the right to question it,
Right.
and but like in their heart, it's like you said, it's like you masturbating to pictures of videos of other naked women really does feel
Mhm.
like cheating,
Yeah.
but they're afraid to speak up. What would you say to someone that's in that situation?
Um, I think it definitely comes down, like, I honestly, I would say I was in that mindset as well, where I'm like, oh, porn's not harmful, porn's fine, like that's just what guys do, I think, and women.
Mhm.
I think that's just like what society leads you to believe. But having been through this experience, that could be very detrimental to someone's relationship if either, like one partner is watching porn. And I think it kind of comes down to like, what are, your sort of boundaries with that? Like, if you have clearly told your partner that I'm not okay with you watching pornography, then that should be the sort of the line that you draw in the relationship, is that no, that's crossing a line. um, for me, there was no line with that, because again, I was kind of in that mindset that no, there's nothing wrong with porn, up until this point that I realized, okay, that also allowed for the escalation of his behaviors.
Mhm.
Not to mention, there's advertisements for webcams in your face. There's other things that are like clickbait on those websites that are kind of allow for that escalation. um but I think pornography is still cheating, right? Like, you are still emotionally getting involved in these videos, and you're looking at these women. And like, now I sort of have a different opinion about that could be very detrimental to to your relationship. um I mean, yeah, that, I mean, my
Yeah,
opinions
so
haven't
if
changed.
yeah, so if you're a partner and you have doubts or feelings, speak up about them and
Yeah.
don't censor yourself. Let your voice be heard, right?
Yeah.
What would you say to, let's say, a guy, like there's women sex addict. Okay, so guy or girl watching this that is, compulsively, habitually using porn, masturbating, other behaviors, sexting, webcamming, escorts. What would you say to them if they're maybe they're not in recovery, but they're kind of wondering like maybe I have a problem,
Yeah.
or they're early in their recovery,
Yeah.
or just in recovery? What would you say to a sex addict watching this?
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I mean, I know it's easier said than done, but I just come clean. Honestly, like, I think if, like, obviously, if there's these behaviors that you're doing, you're obviously being very secretive about it. You're being very calculated about your behaviors. Like, obviously, if you're in a relationship, they've probably already suspected that something's going on. There are already those trust issues that are now starting to develop in the relationship. Like, it's not going to lead you in any positive direction whatsoever. I just know from my experience too, like with Cameron, that he was doing these behaviors for a long time, and I don't think it took a long time for him to get to the point to be like, I think this is a problem. But if you're already starting to suspect that, like, you can't control these behaviors, and that you're having a hard time, like you're internally struggling about
Hmm.
making these choices, like, I think that, yeah, like that is a problem. Like, I think you just need to be honest with yourself, be honest with your partner. And the more that you try and hide and lie things, the worse it's going to get for you. You're never going to be able to build that trust back with them. It's like, it'll just keep happening over the years. And that's just going to either lead to you, losing your partner or losing your family and being in a position that you don't want to be in.
Hmm.
So, really think about that. Think about the consequences that this is going to lead to down the road, and how incredibly traumatic and painful this is for your partner to have to go through this. Like, you know, stop putting them through this pain. You know, it's not going to lead anywhere good for you. So I say just come out and be honest about it. Like, it's hard to hear the truth, but it's harder to be lied to about it, right? I'd much rather have them be upset over the truth than be upset over the lie. That also is going to make it harder for them to earn the trust back. So if you suspect you have a problem, then just come out with it and talk to someone about it.
Right. Well, and I'll just add, find a qualified therapist that is trained in dealing with sexual addiction.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. So, you know, they need to be ASAT or CSAT, like I mentioned before, someone that knows what they're doing with this, because there's always hope, and it's never too late to be honest and come clean and start your recovery. You know, I mean, you guys went right to the very, very brink, but it doesn't need to get that bad. I mean, you know, sometimes it seems that's what it takes for different reasons, but it doesn't, you don't have to be kicked out living in your parents' basement. Like, if that's what it takes, that's what it takes, but it doesn't need to get to that point. And educate, I'm just adding on what you said, but, you know, educate yourself and learn. Like, there's tons and tons of resources out there, and go learn about this, right? So
definitely a lot more resources than I thought, because like I was saying before, like it took me a long time to actually come to terms with that this could be an addiction. Like, because I didn't know. Like, I think if maybe I suspected this, or if I could somehow like get out of my emotional turmoil to think for a minute about his side of it, to be like, this could potentially be a problem. I think if we had made that discovery 5 years ago, then who's to say where we would be today? And I know Cameron says the same thing, where he goes, I wish that we had just made this, like, we knew about this a long time ago. Because that's not the first thing that pops in your head when you're going through this. You just automatically think that your husband's being an asshole and he's cheating on you, and that's just kind of where your mind goes. It's not, well, this could potentially be an issue. So then, it wasn't until that I, just started Googling and started researching it, and there's tons of books out there too on it, like tons of books for partners and for sex addicts that give you a lot of, like, I would say answers. They gave me a lot of answers to my questions.
Any books you recommend offhand?
I think
partners,
there's one called Sex Addict 101 or Sex Addiction 101.
That's for the addict though.
For the addict.
For the partners.
Ooh, I can't remember what it's called right now.
I usually recommend Your Sexually Addicted Spouse.
Yes, that one there.
Yeah, okay, I usually recommend that one. So you can, if you're watching this, just Google Your Sexually Addicted Spouse if you're a partner. Get that book, it's great. Chantal, let's kind of wrap it up. Any final thoughts?
I just kind of want to mention that, like there is help out there, and it honestly is a process. Like, you kind of can't just expect to be completely healed, in a short period of time. You kind of have to just take it a day at a time and really just focus on your own recovery and focus on yourself and knowing what you need in order to, stay in the marriage or stay in the relationship or not stay. I think just get your own support, and you kind of learn how to, to get better from there and how to move in a better direction. But I would not be where I am today if it wasn't for, for Paul and for the Essanon group, and just really believing that things happen for a reason. So yeah, I'm in a much better place now.
Oh, so good to hear. Thanks so much, Chantal, for your courage and honesty and transparency. I know this is really going to help a lot of partners and people watching this. So thanks again for sharing, and we'll talk when we talk again.
Okay.
See you when we see you. Okay. Bye for now.
All right. Bye. Thank you.
Welcome.